We've got a good crowd in the gallery today. Is there anybody who would like to say anything, or who you're with, or what you're doing? What? Oh, really? Representative, go ahead.
Well, there is one group that I would like to introduce and have them stand up if they would. No. Oh, they're lobbyists. We know those. But members of Kansas Farm Bureau and staff, even with Kansas Farm Bureau, if you would stand up and be recognized. Woo! There's some feedback. Thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it.
You got a pretty good defense there.
Yeah.
So going on, we're going to hear House Bill 2456 today, and we'll start with an overview from the advisor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2456 authorizes the Secretary of Wildlife and Parks to issue a Kansas Kids Lifetime Combination Hunting and Fishing License to any child who would be 5 years of age or younger, and the child be, if the child is a resident of Kansas, upon the payment of a license fee capped at $200. It would be not to exceed $200. The license fee may be paid on behalf of the child, so a parent, grandparent, anybody else could pay that license fee. The bill becomes effective upon publication of statute book or July 1st, 2022. I'm happy to stay for any questions.
Any questions, committee? Thank you very much. Secretary Lovelace, are you on, ready to go?
I am, Chairman Corbett.
So at your convenience, you've got the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Corbett and members of the committee. I appreciate the ability to speak to you on behalf of House Bill 2456 today. This bill seeks to create a $100 lifetime combination hunting and fishing license that would be available for children ages 5 and under. The financial loss to Wildlife and Parks would eventually cause a disruption in services provided to resident hunters and anglers and inhibit our ability to recruit participants to outdoor sports and activities. So therefore, the department is opposed to the provisions currently contained within the bill, as we believe the pricing mechanism is unsustainable. Wildlife and Parks would lose an accumulating $12,001 each year. The $200 lifetime youth combination license would be in effect. After 10 years, this multiplies up to over $120,000. The assumptions used to calculate loss of revenue can be seen in the fiscal note, but I'll just admit to you, this is a little bit complicated because it involves our ability to leverage federal funds, which is how we run the department. We take revenues from our customers here in Kansas and then use those to leverage federal money that are collected in excise taxes. So that's the way we're able to the agency, and that's what would be undermined by this approach. The real rub with this, the real challenge to us is that the $200 does not meet the minimum annual revenue requirements to qualify for federal aid. To contrast with this, the existing lifetime hunting and fishing combination license is $962.50, which is currently available for folks from ages 16 to 65. To its credit, and we really do appreciate the intent of this bill, and so we're all trying to remove barriers to participating in these activities in Kansas, and we know that that was the intent of this bill, and we appreciate that. This bill focuses on removing a cost barrier in an effort to attract more youth to becoming new hunters and anglers. And while cost is a barrier, the cost, based on our surveys and our experience and other states' experience, the cost that normally is a bigger barrier is the startup costs associated with outdoor gear, access to ground, and things like that. Those become the bigger barriers as a result, that we find as a result of our surveys. The other barriers that aren't addressed by this bill, such as access, not knowing where to go, or having someone to go with, or mentorship and social support, that is somebody who can introduce them to the outdoors, are the bigger barriers. By utilizing the financial resources that we have developed over the years efforts to break down those barriers I mentioned. And a couple of those are in recruitment of new hunters and anglers. Today, we have a R3 program, which is recruitment, retention, and reactivating hunters and anglers. And several programs focused on youth are currently in place. One is a student air rifle program. Another is hunter education in schools. Another is national archery in the schools, which is really growing at a rapid pace. There are traditional hunter education classes and then aquatic education. I know last summer I was working with in Emporia to recruit new folks from the Hispanic community there into angling, and it was a terrific program that we partnered with Bass Pro Shops on. Importantly, because mentors are needed, our programs must also target adults from the critical missing link in getting youth into the outdoors, somebody who will invite them and engage them and teach them. The programs we have that provide opportunities for adults and new youth to hunting and fishing include our mentored hunts that we advertise each year, a program called Becoming an Outdoor Woman, which is the acronym is BOW, a very popular program for recruiting women into the out sports, and then also our special hunts that we offer. Additionally, we're in the process of developing a comprehensive R3 action plan to guide our future recruitment and retention efforts and improve the success of our program. House Bill 2456 proposes this youth lifetime hunting and fishing combination license at an 80% discount of the lifetime license that we currently offer. To better understand the potential impact this could have on our programs, we looked at studies that other states have done. 3 states in particular, Tennessee, Minnesota, and Nebraska, have all done analyses of their lifetime licenses to look at the impact and the benefits of those programs. The most thorough study was done by Tennessee in conjunction with a consultant, Southwick and Associates, that's for over 2 decades has been the go-to organization to evaluate what programs work and don't work. Out of that study, they had an important quote. They said, lifetime hunting and fishing licenses, when properly bundled and priced, can help to combat downturns in hunting and fishing participation. It can increase net revenue of state agencies and also help foster the growth of hunting. But the emphasis there is when properly priced. When improperly priced, these can cause agencies such as ours to forego revenue that would otherwise be generated by the sales of annual licenses. Now, the important thing, I included this in my notes, Tennessee, as I said, did the most extensive study on the impacts of this, and they have a really complex scale for different ages. You pay gradually more and more as you get closer to 16 for your lifetime licenses. And they try to be really careful about how they did that, but still, the overall assessment by the person who's over marketing for them, who we work pretty closely with, said that this was causing them to hemorrhage money in Tennessee. Despite their best efforts, they are really worried about the impacts not only now, but in the future as this multiplies. The proposed price of the youth lifetime license concerns us because of the loss of future revenue and federal aid reimbursements. If these are incorrectly priced, the burden to fund all the work we do, conservation, hunting, and fishing programs, would have to fall on the other hunters and anglers who do purchase licenses at current fees. If we can develop the proper pricing structure for lifetime licenses, both the customer and the agency would benefit. So we think there's a potential for this if priced properly. We have been working diligently on just such a pricing recommendation. And one of the things we'd love to visit with you about in the future is how we could develop that to incentivize the mentoring that goes on through reduced license fees or we could use a number of mechanisms, but incentivize mentors to want to engage with these youth and really bring them along. That appears to be the critical missing link that we're working so hard to develop. So we're very open to conversations about that in the future, and would love to generate those kind of new ideas. As Secretary, I'd welcome the opportunity to further inform the committee about our efforts over time if you're interested in those. But this concludes my remarks, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Committee, any questions? Representative Gardner. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Yeah, you keep mentioning federal guidelines, federal subsidies, so can you expand a little bit on that? I mean, why?
Sure.
I understand the $200 price tag is too low, evidently, to receive, but could you give the committee sort of an overview?
Sure. So that money, when you buy a fishing lure or a hunting rifle, there's a tax that's been associated with that the feds put in a fund. That's available to us based on a cost share basis to go back to Kansas and all the other states to run our programs. The feds develop a formula that establishes a minimum cost per year per a hunter or an angler in order to leverage those federal funds. So when we develop something like a lifetime license, of course, if it's an annual license, that's covered without any problem. But if it's a lifetime license like this, then basically we need to do the math and say between the ages of 16 and 64, when they'd be required to buy a regular license, the minimum amount that the feds require have to be included in that license for every one of those years. So you do the math and you take that number of years. If it's 54 years, say, then you multiply that by the minimum federal required amount, and our license has to equal or exceed that in order to leverage that federal aid for every year, about $26 per person per year. If it drops below that, then we can't leverage that for those years. And that's the big loss that we have for a license like this compared to if a person were buying an annual license or if they bought a fully priced lifetime license. If that makes sense?
Yes, it is, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions?
I have one. Go ahead.
Representative Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the comments there today. So I lived at a lake for the last 20 years, and it's always been a challenge trying to get all the neighbor kids to get interested in fishing and hunting. It seems like they all come and everybody buys a fishing pole and they're all excited about learning how to fish. Then after they catch a few fish, and especially those big catfish that Grandpa doesn't want to deal with because they don't taste very good, the fishing poles all end up in my boathouse. So like rabbits, I have a surplus of them. So I think you hit on something really important there, and that is the ability to interest that next generation in hunting and fishing. The numbers are down. The number of those children, there aren't as many of them, but their interest in hunting and fishing and the encouragement they receive from their parents to hunt and fish, it's just not there. That requires somebody's effort to go out and teach those kids how to properly handle a gun or a fishing pole. You know, the worst thing is to have somebody drowned. But so with that in mind, we've done something locally in Council Grove that's kind of helped on the side of this. Our community foundation and some of our private foundations have stepped up to fund some of the cost of teaching kids how how to handle a firearm and stuff like that. And I'm sure we could expand some of that over into a broader base of fishing. So maybe working through the different foundations and nonprofit foundations throughout the state, the amount of dollars we're talking about here aren't that great. So maybe that's another viable option to help educate these kids. But I think we may have a bigger goal, bigger struggle trying to get parents and mentors to step up and do that. I don't want to teach those kids how to fish because I don't want to deal with the fish. I'm done with that. I've done all that. Same way with deer. Don't like them. Not interested in skinning deer and cutting their head off. Not my ambition anymore. So I think that's a problem, and as more kids live in an urban area, I think it's going to continue to be a problem. But yeah, just a thought and a comment on maybe a possible different alternative of funding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Brad, you mentioned, I think we've kind of talked about this, but my question was, if we would implement a license such as this, would it affect your ability to attract the kids into the hunter training? And do you see that? I'm just trying to, would they feel they didn't have to do it because they already have a license? I don't know how that incentive is. Tell me about that incentive to get kids into hunter training and gun safety things.
Yeah, so right now, youth isn't required to have a license until they turn 16. So it's not really a barrier, and that's intentional. We want to reduce every barrier we can, particularly at those critical ages when we're hoping they'll get mentored, get exposed to these great outdoor experiences. One of the things that we've done in the last several years is a really neat idea, because based on our surveys with young people, we find that lots of times kids will be exposed to that and they'll enjoy it until they get into about high school. Then between high school and college, we tend to lose them. And so we've actually got a license, multi-year license on the books right now for those ages of kids. So our hope is, and this goes right along with Representative Corbett's bill, to hit them at a critical time where a parent or a grandparent or a friend could give them that license, get rid of that barrier. So every time they come back home, they can still participate in those things without saying, oh, shoot, I didn't buy a license for fishing or hunting. So that's one of the things we've done recently to really try to hit that critical time period when in the past we've lost youth. We're doing that. And then we're also developing programs in colleges, right? That's a time where kids are often open. And if they haven't been exposed, that's a time for us to recruit new ones. And so we're working on several different fronts to try to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Secretary, what would be the price of the license that Representative Carlin was talking about?
So I'm not sure I know exactly which license.
So the license you were referring to for the people that were 16 or whatever, your high schoolers, your college people, you said you had a license for them, and I was just asking you what the price of the license was.
We do. I'll ask a colleague down the hall who's listening in if he knows that amount, and we'll get that right back to you. I don't have that off the tip of my tongue, Chairman Corbett. I'll seek that out here real fast.
Thank you. Representative?
Yes, so my question is, you know, I'm thinking about this in real life terms. So where I'm from, I can see a bunch of grandparents going and doing licenses for all their grandkids, their great grandkids, and really, I guess I look at it the time value of money. So if we are going to buy a bunch of licenses for these children that are under 16, you know, maybe when they're 16, they're already into video games and sports, and so those parents or grandparents are not going to go and spend the money to get those license fees, which we don't know what that is yet. But, you know, I'm sitting here thinking, well, if you have a bunch of kids with licenses for $200 and that's just going to sit in the pot until they're 16, where's there a downside to that?
Right. So, yep. Yeah, thank you. Good question. So the downside is our ability to use that money for if they, obviously, the goal isn't to just put money in our pockets. We want to figure out ways to really recruit those kids into these outdoor sports. And so, but if it would happen that a grandparent buys those licenses for all their kids when they're very young, if they don't use those, then you're right, that's just money sitting there. But it's a relatively small amount of money compared to if we price those fully and then are able to use those year after year for that federal aid. That's where the real value comes in. And that's where the loss is. If they do get active, then the income we'd realize off them, the benefit of having them staying engaged in the sport would be lost because that price is set so low. It's interesting, your point, because I was thinking the same way when we were first discussing this bill. I could see a lot of parents saying, boy, I hope that my grandson or granddaughter want to get into these sports, and you buy them when they're young. What we actually see, though, when we look at other states, as I said, we've evaluated the success of this in other states, and what we see is a small amount of people will buy those licenses when their kids are young, like this would target. But thanks, Steve. But the majority of them, what they do is, and this won't surprise any of you, they wait until their kids are closer to 16. At 16, they'd have to buy the full price lifetime license. But the parents or grandparents, whoever, do the math. And when those kids are 13, 14, 15, saying, wow, Johnny or Judy are an avid outdoors person, they're going to need to buy licenses for years. So we'll buy it when we can cheaper now before they turn 16. But at that point, see, the die is kind of already cast. People have invested their time in those kids, and they're going to, and it's a good investment in the license, because at that point they realize these kids are really committed and they're going to really use this, and they'll benefit financially with the savings by me buying it now when they're 13, 14, 15, instead of waiting until they're 16. So it's interesting that the data we've gotten from other states. And Chairman, if I may, to your question about that multi-year youth combination license, it goes between the ages of 16 and 20, and it's $72.50. So that's combination fishing and hunting for all those years, 16 through 20, and that's again to participation at a time where oftentimes we see them falling out of our ranks.
Thank you. Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess this question's for you, Mr. Chairman, to start off with. Mr. Chairman, a question for you. When you worked on this bill with the reviser, how did you come up with the $200 fee?
Thank you, Representative. I went on. I did a search on the internet. I found that West Virginia was $322. Let's see, what state's this? Louisiana was $300. Let's see, $212 for one, and then New Hampshire was $304. And the point is, I think, like always, it seems like there's always, there's people who just do not want it. This license would hurt no one. It's a first step, and I believe that if a grandparent or a parent devoted gamble $200, it's just like putting betting 28 on a roulette wheel. You're just hoping. But the nice thing about it is, if they invest the money, they're going to go out and they're going to buy guns. They're going to do all that stuff between whatever and the rest of their life. So they're going to be buying shells and guns and poles those 16 years. Whether if you don't let this go happen, you're going to get maybe nothing. And that money doubles every 7 years. So you got 200, 400, 800. It's not just $200, but it's not the money. You've got a $92 million budget. I just don't see how you could sit there and say to the kids of Kansas, this shoe don't fit. I mean, the people who live here, sometimes, I don't mean the way this sounds, maybe sometimes just don't give a flip about what the feds are doing. And several states, I gave you 4 states there that do it. And I just think that, I just thought that one time in your life, maybe Kansas could come up with a better license. And I think that this, you may not sell any, but I guarantee you it ain't going to hurt to try. And as you know, Secretary, your resident hunting numbers have been like a slipper slide for 15 years. They're just on a fast downhill slide. And that's why I started this. This is not, I'm working with you, not against you. And then if over the years, if we could get 1,000 or 2,000 kids a year or more, those are people that's going to be part of your life to you pass on. And I look at it as a win-win. And of course, some people look at the glass half empty and some look at it half full. So, Representative.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and oh, sorry. Did you?
I was, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your response. But what I was also, and I'll ask the Secretary, on some of these that I look at, different states, they have different age categories, different classes of age categories. And I'm just wondering, I think the Secretary mentioned it earlier that maybe they've been working on a spreadsheet or different possible classes. Is that correct, Mr. Secretary? I mean, is that something you're working on that might be an answer possibly to this?
Yes, in fact, we are, because we know the key is figuring out a way to incentivize those mentors to reach out. Representative Baker talked about the gap when you don't have adults that are willing to take time to spend with those kids. And that's the critical part right there. So while I know the intent of this bill is to do that, we understand, based on our experience in Kansas and other states, that critical link is dealing with those older mentors. And so that's where our focus is. But to your point, I mean, the licenses have a part of that. And so what we're thinking is that maybe we can incentivize a reduction in a cost for, say, a mentor license, right? For that adult, when I want to take my neighbor kid out, to help incentivize that and encourage me to go down the street and invite that youngster to go out with me instead of going out by myself or just with my buddies. That's the critical link that we're missing. And so with all the programs I listed before, those are the things that we're targeting. That's really where we'll make progress when it comes to recruiting new hunters and anglers in Kansas.
Representative Newland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the information also. The one point I would like for you to clarify is this bill goes from age 5 and under. This thing is really... See if this one's any better. But so this doesn't allow people to come in with these youngsters are 5 to 16 and purchase that.
Is Mike still on?
No, that's what I'm using. Yeah. Is that correct? Am I following that scenario correct?
Correct. We understand the way it's written right now, it only applies to those kids up to 5 years of age. But I may have been confusing you because I'm comparing with other states that oftentimes do have those intermediate ages where they'll say, for instance, this one says $200 for 0 to 5, and then it'd be $400 from 5 to 15 or something like that. And some, like Tennessee that I mentioned, have kind of complex stair-stepped, schedules for license cost.
I see. So is there a number that you would identify with as far as a cost that would be more susceptible, that would help us garner those federal funds?
It definitely is. We can do that math, and we did the math for that. Basically, when you look at that I think it's 962, we charge for a lifetime combination license right now. That was our attempt a few years ago to do the math based on that federal requirement to know what it would take, what was the amount we could charge, where we would leverage those federal monies year after year and get the full benefit of that kind of federal cost share. So it's got to be up in that range. I'll complicate this one way further. The feds, no surprise to anyone there, periodically change what's required for that federal match. So it has gone down and it's gone up over time. A few years ago, it was the full price of an annual combination hunting and fishing license. So it was really high. It's shifted since then. So it's really a moving target. However, it would need to be significantly higher than 200, but we could work on this and try to come up with a more palatable number. We had some discussions with Representative Corbett, some ideas for different numbers, and we could continue that conversation to try to come up with something that is more beneficial, so the burden doesn't get shifted onto other, members of the hunting and fishing public.
Would you happen to have a guess of how many of these licenses that the state might sell in a year's time?
I saw that for some other states, and it seems to me, and I apologize, I'll just go from memory. It seems to me that when we looked at this in Nebraska over the last, I think they started theirs maybe in 2004 or something. It seems like they'll sell a few hundred of them a year. I know our calculations that we gave you were done based on the only thing we had available, and that was the number of full-priced lifetime licenses we sell annually. That's what we based our numbers on. When we look at other states, it's less than that are sold for just this first 0 to 5 age group in those states. So a few hundred, maybe something like that, but I would be glad. I would be glad to get back to you with numbers from other states to give you better, more accurate numbers to work from.
Okay. What is the number of licenses that you sell or lifetime license that you sell now, average-wise?
400. Steve can correct me down the hall, but I think it's in the 450 range, something like that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So I contacted my group back home that kind of the outdoor specialist, and on the hunting side of it, they said the biggest barrier to entry on the hunting side is access to hunting land. There's nowhere left to hunt. The landowners have obligated their land to the outfitters, and the ability to go out and hunt prime hunting land is gone. And I understand that as a landowner, you got to maximize the return on that. And I know in eastern Kansas, they're paying more to hunt deer on land than we're charging for pasture land out there. So I think that might be an issue that we need to address also. I'm not sure how that works. I think the feds have tried to do that with walk-in hunting and sent that a little bit. But I don't think we're moving the needle. I know this much, there's plenty of deer. We're not moving the needle on that. There's plenty of deer to hunt. But anyhow, access to good places to hunt and fish continues to be a real problem. The good ponds are locked. You're locked out because they've leased those out to people who like to fish for sport. So thank you.
Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of comments. First of all, I'm looking at this staggering loss of $123,210. That doesn't seem staggering to me. That seems like a good investment for kids that we are struggling. Children are struggling so much right now. So if we can foster some license for up till they're 5 years old, at $200, I just think that's worth the gamble. I really do, though. I wanted to comment on your mentorship program. I think that's phenomenal. You know, I think it still has to be before they're 16, though. Kids, there's so many things coming after our kids, so many, so much stimuli, and so maybe 10. I don't know if, you know, I'd love to know more about that mentorship program you said you guys were working on, but if somebody could mentor children that, you know, starting at 10 years old, and then maybe there's another lifetime sort of license level there or something, but $123,000 just seems like a drop in the bucket compared to if we can save. We have got to start fostering and investing in our kids, especially in rural America. That just, I sit in this budget committee and we waste so much money, millions of dollars. $123,000 that's just, it seems, and I understand that's only over 10 years, but that's worth it to me to see how this program would do for these $200 licenses. But I would like to talk to you more. Maybe you could get more of your information to us about the mentorship program, and maybe we can meet in the middle, like in 10 years old or something, and do a different licensing fee. Thanks.
Representative Gardner?
One more, Mr. Chairman. Maybe, I understand where the secretary is coming from. There's some good points made. Maybe we need to look at, is $200 the right price? Maybe it should be $300. I don't know. Maybe I hate to put sunsets, but maybe whatever we pass, or if we do pass and go forward, maybe we analyze it for a few years and look at the data and make sure it's doing what we think it should be doing, and the sales. I'm just sitting here thinking, which it could get dangerous here, but I'm just throwing some of those ideas out.
Anybody else? Anything else, committee? Mr. Secretary, it's been a good session, but like most things, everything we talked about today was really not about the what we're here to talk about. The nice thing about this bill for $200, it's just a gamble. A grandparent or somebody's just throwing the dice and hoping their grandkids or kids will play the game. And the other nice thing about this is, even if they don't get into it when they're 6 or 8 or 10, maybe later they can, or maybe even this gives them the option to move back to Canada when they move back to Canada, and if they move away or something. But it's, I think, for the size and breadth of your department, making an issue over a $200 license is pencil dust. But I'll let the committee will have it say, and we'll work it tomorrow. But who? Oh, excuse me, Representative Akala.
I know you were trying to keep me from talking. Where's your necktie at, too, Chairman? Well, I got to say that.
Can't hear you. He's not on. What'd you do yesterday to get me on, Josh?
He's fading. Tell him something. Can you ask him if he can hear it? Can you hear us, John?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
We can't hear you.
Well, I heard you then.
Have him turn his video
Yeah.
off and see if his broadband will
Hold on.
work.
Start off.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, start over.
Okay, so if you're a hardcore hunting family, which I know quite a few of them in my district, they're going to jump on this. And so I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good concept. I'm not familiar with the other states of the kind of revenue that they draw in there, but I am familiar with people that are hunting families and they got young children that they're trying to get involved with hunting, and sometimes it means just cleaning up whatever they bring home after they've hunted with the little kids. I got a neighbor that, has a 10, 11-year-old kid. I bet he can, clean up stock a lot better than any grown adult. So I think it's worth the chance without knowing a lot of detail other than this the concept. So I just wanted to add that in there. That's it. Thank you, Kent.
Thank you. Anything else, committee? Secretary, do you have anything you'd like to say before we close the hearing?
I guess the only thing I'd say is I really applaud everybody's intent to really help us out when it comes to this. What we're trying to do our best is to be efficient in how we spend money, and we feel like be a drain on our efforts to really target those programs I mentioned, which have shown success in our state and other states. And so that's our preference, but we appreciate your intent with this bill. And if you'd like to consider adjusting the numbers and making it more fiscally positive for our programs, we'd love to talk to you about that.
That would be great. I'm at 179 North. So with that, we are close the hearing, and thanks, everybody. And if anybody has anything, we're adjourned.